The studio lights blazed down, casting a golden glow across the polished set of Today with Jenna and Friends. The cameras panned across the smiling hosts, the cheerful audience, the glittering backdrop that promised nothing but lighthearted conversation and easy laughter. But within minutes, that illusion would be shattered, because what began as a casual morning interview would spiral into one of the most uncomfortable unforgettable moments ever broadcast on daytime television. The star guest that morning was Kylie Kelce, wife of Philadelphia Eagles center Jason Kelce. She wasn't there to stir controversy. She wasn't there to fight. She came prepared to talk about something deeply meaningful. Charity initiative to bring sports programs to underserved youth. A story of hope, of giving, of community. It should have been a feel-good segment, but live TV has a way of turning smiles into storms. Jenna Bush-Hager, the show's lead host, welcomed Kylie with the warmth viewers had come to expect. Compliments were exchanged. Small talk flowed easily. For a few blissful minutes, everything seemed ordinary. But in live broadcasting, ordinary never lasts. Because as Kylie spoke passionately about her foundation, Jenna leaned forward. Her smile stayed on her face, but her words carried a sharper edge. "There's been quite a bit of discussion," Jenna said, her tone deceptively light, "about NFL wives and how visible they've become. Some people feel they might even be overshadowing the players themselves." The question hung in the air like a spark near dry kindling. Kylie's smile faltered, just slightly. Enough for the cameras to catch. Enough for the audience to feel a shift in the air. She responded diplomatically, steady, measured. But beneath the calm exterior, the storm had already begun to brew, and the audience knew it. There was a tension in the studio now, something unspoken but undeniable. Even the cameramen, seasoned veterans of live television, shifted uncomfortably, because they could sense what was coming. A conversation that was about to veer far off course. A conversation that would not end with applause, but with an empty chair. This wasn't going to be the lighthearted interview Kylie Kelce had signed up for. This was going to be a battle. And before the morning was over, someone was going to walk off set. The air in the studio was still light, at least on the surface. Kylie Kelce sat comfortably in the guest chair, hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression calm but glowing with the kind of passion only genuine purpose can bring. She spoke about children, about communities without access to sports, about the way athletics can build discipline, teamwork, and confidence. Every word dripped with sincerity, every sentence a reminder of why she had accepted this invitation in the first place. Jenna Bush-Hager nodded along, smiling brightly for the cameras. The hosts laughed politely. The audience clapped at all the right moments, and for a while, it seemed the segment would remain exactly what it was meant to be. Safe, predictable morning television, but then came the subtle shift. It started with an almost casual segue that sounded innocent enough, but carried the seeds of something much bigger. Jenna leaned in, her voice just a touch lower. Her eyes fixed on Kylie in a way that felt less like conversation and more like interrogation. "Of course, Kylie, your husband's platform has given you a lot of visibility. But what do you think about this growing idea that some NFL wives are becoming just as famous as their husbands? Sometimes even more visible than the players themselves?" The audience chuckled softly, unsure whether to treat it as a joke or a jab. Kylie's smile wavered again. Her lips parted, then pressed together. There was a flicker in her eyes, subtle but unmistakable. A shift from warmth to caution. She answered with poise, as though stepping carefully across thin ice. "I think every family handles their public life differently. Some are private, some are more open. There isn't really a right or wrong way." Her tone was measured, neutral, diplomatic. But it was also the kind of answer that carried an unspoken warning. Don't push further. Yet Jenna did. And as she did, the mood in the studio began to tighten. It was still a conversation about family, about visibility, about balance, but beneath it, the current was growing stronger, darker. The audience leaned forward in their seats. The cameramen focused in a little tighter. The producers exchanged glances from behind the glass. This wasn't just charity talk anymore. Something was building. Something volatile, and the real interview hadn't even started yet. The smiles were still there, but they had hardened. What once felt like casual morning chatter was now teetering on the edge of something sharper, something far more dangerous. The audience could feel it. The producers could feel it. And most importantly, Kylie Kelce could feel it. Jenna's tone, still cloaked in politeness, carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. She leaned forward once more, voice deceptively casual. Support is wonderful, of course. But some people say when family members become too prominent, when they're in the spotlight too much, it can distract from the athletes themselves. What do you think about that balance? The word hung there, distract. A single spark tossed into a room full of gasoline. Kylie straightened in her chair. The warmth she had radiated just minutes earlier cooled, replaced by something harder, sharper. She locked eyes with Jenna, her smile gone, her tone steady but edged with steel. Are you suggesting that wives supporting their husbands somehow takes away from their accomplishments? Because that sounds like a pretty outdated way of thinking. A murmur rippled through the audience. Some shifted uncomfortably, others leaned forward, hungry for what might come next. The tension was undeniable now. The interview had veered off script. Jenna gave a tight smile, attempting to soften the blow, but her words betrayed her. Oh no, not at all. I'm just pointing out that some people feel it becomes a distraction when the families draw too much media attention. And there it was again, distraction. The match had been struck twice. Kylie's eyes narrowed. Her voice grew sharper, her words cutting with precision. So let me get this straight. Women supporting their husbands is a distraction? That's the angle we're going with here? The silence in the room thickened, pressing down on everyone present. Co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to intervene. The producers behind the cameras exchanged frantic hand signals, debating whether to cut to commercial or let this simmer, but it was too late. The conflict had been born. Two women, locked in a battle of wills. One pressing, probing, unwilling to back down. The other, bracing, defiant, refusing to be diminished. This was no longer a polite interview. This was the spark that would ignite a fire. The studio no longer felt like a morning show. It felt like a courtroom, or perhaps a battlefield. The smiles had evaporated, replaced with tight jaws and narrowed eyes. Kylie Kelce leaned forward now, her posture unyielding, her voice ringing with restrained fury. Distractions. That's what we're calling it now? Women supporting their husbands are distractions? The words cut through the studio like glass. The audience shifted, restless, whispering under their breath. Co-hosts glanced nervously at each other, their polished expressions cracking ever so slightly. Everyone in the room could sense it, the temperature was rising fast. Jenna, her confidence visibly shaken but not yet broken, attempted to reel the moment back in. She leaned closer, her voice soft, almost pleading. No, that's not what I meant. I just think there's an interesting conversation to be had about visibility in sports. Sometimes family members become very prominent in the media, and it can shift the focus. Kylie's response came like a strike of lightning. So what you're saying is that wives should sit quietly in the background, make sure they don't shift the focus, and basically pretend they don't exist. Because that's exactly how it sounds. Her tone was no longer diplomatic. It was sharp, cutting, impossible to ignore. The audience gasped. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, their lenses locked onto Kylie's face as though afraid to miss a second of what was unfolding. The producers behind the glass were frantic now. Do they cut to commercial? Do they intervene? Or do they let the tension boil, knowing that viral television gold was forming right in front of them? Jenna's smile faltered completely. Her tone hardened, rising in pitch. That's not what I said, Kylie. I'm asking a broader question about whether the growing attention on NFL wives changes the conversation around the sport itself. But Kylie wasn't backing down. She crossed her arms, leaning back with a glare that seemed to pierce through the set lights. No, you're not asking a broader question. You're pushing a narrative. You're suggesting that our support somehow diminishes our husband's achievements. And I'm telling you, that's insulting. The room pulsed with tension, a living, breathing storm. The back and forth was no longer cautious. It was open conflict, and neither side seemed willing to retreat. The escalation had begun. in the next move, would push this confrontation past the point of no return. The words were sharper now. No diplomacy, no careful phrasing. Just two women, locked in verbal combat. Live on air with millions watching. Jenna's cheeks flushed pink as her voice climbed louder than before. Kylie, I never said you shouldn't support your husband. But public figures have to expect difficult questions. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't have agreed to come on television. The studio froze. The words hit like a punch. Gasps rippled across the audience. Even Jenna's co-hosts looked stunned, their eyes widening in disbelief at what she had just said. Kylie's jaw tightened. Her eyes widened for just a moment, then narrowed into something fiercer, more dangerous. Her voice, when it came, was calm to calm. Excuse me. Did you just tell me I can't handle being on television? That I don't belong here because I objected to sexist questions? Jenna's composure cracked. She stammered, reaching for a softer tone. But the damage was already done. That's not what I meant. I was saying, but Kylie didn't let her finish. She leaned forward, her voice cutting through like a blade. No, let's be very clear. You ambushed me. You invited me here to talk about helping children, about building communities. Instead, you decided to question whether I'm an appropriate NFL wife. You tried to turn me into a headline? The audience held its breath. The co-hosts tried desperately to intervene, but neither woman was listening anymore. The conversation was no longer an interview, it was a duel. Jenna's voice rose again, defensive and shaky. That's not true. I was trying to ask thoughtful questions about a trend in sports culture. Don't twist my words. Kylie's response was volcanic. She stood, pushing her chair back with a sharp scrape across the studio floor. Her hands pressed against her hips, her shoulders squared. Her voice thundered with controlled fury. Thoughtful? Calling women distractions? Suggesting we overshadow our husbands? That's not thoughtful. That's outdated, offensive, and insulting. The audience erupted into nervous whispers. The tension was unbearable. Co-hosts signaled frantically to producers. Cameras zoomed in on Kylie, now standing tall over Jenna, who sat shrinking into her chair. This was the breaking point. The fragile thread holding the interview together had snapped, and what happened next would sear itself into live television. History forever. The studio air was electric, crackling with tension so thick you could almost hear it. Kylie Kelce stood tall, towering over the set with her voice echoing across the hushed studio. Jenna sat frozen, her once confident smile shattered into fragments of uncertainty. The co-hosts shifted nervously, glancing toward the producers who were frantically waving from behind the glass, begging for a commercial break. But no one dared cut away, not yet. Not from this. Kylie's words cut with surgical precision, her voice low but unwavering. You brought me here under false pretenses. I came to talk about kids, about building opportunities. Instead, you wanted a spectacle. You wanted to question my role as a wife, my right to be visible. That's not journalism. That's an ambush. The audience was silent, stone silent. Not a cough, not a laugh, not even a shuffle of feet. They knew they were witnessing a moment that would explode far beyond this studio. Jenna's face flushed crimson. She tried to gather herself, clutching her cue cards as if they could shield her from the storm. Her voice quivered as she fired back. That's not fair, Kylie. I've been doing this for years. I pride myself on asking tough, important questions. You're twisting this into something it's not. Kylie leaned in, eyes blazing. Important questions? About my charity work? About how to give kids a chance? Or important questions about whether I should keep quiet and know my place? The words landed like blows, each one slicing through the thin veneer of civility still clinging to the conversation. The co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. One of them attempting to interject, maybe we should circle back to the foundation work. It sounds like such important, but Kylie cut them off instantly, her voice firm, unyielding. No, we're not moving past this. Because what's happening here isn't just about me. It's about every woman who's ever been told to sit down, smile, and stay quiet, while the men get all the credit. The audience gasped. Jenna's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time in the entire exchange, she looked powerless. Pinned beneath the weight of Kylie's fury, the fallout was undeniable. The interview was no longer salvageable. The show had descended into chaos, and everyone knew it. The storm had reached its peak, but Kylie Kelce wasn't finished. She turned from Jenna to the cameras, her posture rigid, her tone shifting from fury to conviction. Suddenly, she wasn't speaking just to a host, she was speaking to millions. "Here's what I want people to understand," she said, her voice steady, each word deliberate. "I am proud of my husband. I am proud of what he has accomplished. And I am proud to stand beside him, to cheer for him, to celebrate him. If that makes me too visible, too vocal, or too outspoken, that's other people's problem, not mine." The audience sat transfixed, caught in the gravity of her words. Even those who came for a lighthearted morning show now leaned forward. Sensing they were witnessing something far larger than daytime TV, Jenna's eyes darted to the co-hosts, searching for rescue, but none came. They sat stiff in their chairs, unwilling to insert themselves into a confrontation that had spiraled out of control. The producers gestured desperately for a commercial, and Kylie pressed on, her words hitting harder with each passing second. "What disappoints me most," she continued, "is that this could have been a meaningful conversation. We could have highlighted the kids we're helping, the communities we're lifting up. Instead, we're stuck here wasting time on outdated questions about whether women should stay in their lane. That's not progress. That's regression." Her gaze hardened, locking back on Jenna, who now looked small beneath the hot studio lights. Kylie's voice cut through the silence one final time. "I didn't come here to defend my existence as a supportive spouse. I came here to talk about impact. And if this show can't handle that, then maybe you're the ones who aren't ready for real conversation." She lifted her purse from the floor, her movements slow, deliberate, final. The studio audience didn't applaud, didn't boo. They simply sat in stunned stillness, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would ripple across social media before the hour was over. Jenna, pale and speechless, could only stare as Kylie walked toward the edge of the stage. And with that, the interview was over, but the story was only just beginning. The set of Today with Jenna and Friends had never been so quiet. Kylie Kelce's footsteps echoed as she made her way down the stage steps, purse slung over her shoulder, her head held high. The studio lights seemed dimmer now, as if even they understood the weight of what had just transpired. The co-hosts sat frozen in their chairs, their rehearsed smiles wiped away, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. The producers behind the cameras scrambled, shouting silent commands, waving frantically for a commercial break that had come too late. Because the real damage was already done. Jenna Bush Hager remained in her seat, her face pale, her body rigid. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, words failing her for the first time in her polished career. Just minutes earlier, she had been in control, guiding the conversation with confidence. Now, she looked like a host who had lost everything. Her footing, her authority, and perhaps her audience's trust. The crowd in the studio didn't know what to do. Some clapped awkwardly as Kylie disappeared off stage, a gesture of support mixed with confusion. Others simply sat in silence, staring at Jenna, waiting for her to recover. But she didn't. The co-hosts tried to step in, their voices trembling as they muttered something about taking a quick break. Yet the cameras kept rolling for a few more unbearable seconds, capturing every ounce of humiliation, every flicker of regret on Jenna's face. And then the screen faded to black. Within hours, the clip spread like wildfire. Twitter exploded. TikTok stitched the walk-off moment into countless reaction videos. Headlines screamed across every platform, "Kylie Kelce walks off live TV after heated clash." Millions picked sides. Team Kylie, Team Jenna. The debate roared across living rooms, office break rooms, and group chats everywhere. But for those who had been in the studio that morning, the memory was seared into their minds forever. The silence, the tension, the feeling that they had witnessed not just a talk show gone wrong, but a cultural flashpoint. Kylie Kelce had left the set, but her words, The sting of them, the truth of them, still echoed long after she was gone, and Jenna Bush Hager was left to pick up the pieces. And now, the question is yours to answer. Whose side are you on? Did Kylie Kelce do exactly what needed to be done, standing her ground, refusing to let herself be diminished, and walking out with dignity? Or was Jenna Bush Hager simply pressing on a controversial topic, trying to spark a bigger discussion about sports, fame, and family? Moments like this divide audiences for a reason. They hit nerves. They expose beliefs. They force us to pick a side. And this clash, this walk-off, is bigger than just one interview. It's about visibility. It's about respect. It's about how women in the spotlight are treated when they refuse to shrink into the background. So, I want to hear from you. Comment below right now. Are you Team Kylie or Team Jenna? Don't hold back. Your voice matters, and I'll be pinning the most thoughtful responses. And if this story had you glued to the screen, make sure you subscribe. Because this channel is where explosive moments like this are broken down, exposed, and remembered. The walk-offs, the clashes, the controversies, you'll find them all right here. So, what's your verdict? Kylie, Jenna, the floor is yours.